It's Friday, the 18th of June 2021. Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business Headlines, the business news you need in just 5 minutes. I'm Sean Aylmer. In today's headlines, the Australian unemployment rate falls to pre-pandemic levels, but no sign yet from the Reserve Bank that it wants to move on interest rates. Plus, the COVID cluster in New South Wales grows as the government limits the use of the AstraZeneca vaccine. The federal government's landmark superannuation reforms passed the Senate, and Coles' big spend triggers a big fall in its share price. Our lead story today, the unemployment rate has fallen to 5.1%, the same level as before the pandemic, increasing pressure on the Reserve Bank to tighten monetary policy. More than 115,000 new jobs were created last month, mostly full-time roles, and there are now tens of thousands more jobs in the economy than before the pandemic. But in a speech written ahead of the release of the data, Reserve Bank Governor Philip Lowe said the business had a laser-like focus on costs, and that was preventing the jobs recovery flowing through to higher wages, a necessary condition for lifting interest rates. The jobless rate is now about where the Federal Treasury forecast it would be in a year's time. The underemployment and underutilisation rates have both fallen, and the hours worked and participation rate have risen. Federal Treasurer Josh Frydenberg said the economy still had a long way to go, but it was recovering strongly and the labour force data provided light at the end of the tunnel. Dr Lowe called the recovery in Australia V-shaped, but warned the country wasn't out of the woods yet. Several high-profile market economists in Australia now expect the first move in the official cash rate to occur in 2023, ahead of the Reserve Bank's timetable. Certainly the run of recent economic data, particularly yesterday's unemployment figures, support their argument. In overseas news, the number of Americans filing new claims for unemployment rose for the first time in 6 weeks, but most market economists said it was probably a blip in the trend down as the world's largest economy continues to reopen. The consensus view is that the unemployment rate will fall below 5% by the end of the year. Beijing has fully vaccinated 80% of its adult residents, or 15.6 million people, as China's vaccination total passes 1 billion. Beijing is a standout among major cities, according to Bloomberg, with New York City's vaccination level at 47% and Singapore and London both at 35%. And spare a thought for Gautam Adani, the Indian billionaire well known to Australians because of his eponymous coal mine in Queensland. According to Bloomberg, Mr. Adani lost more wealth this week than anyone else in the world, with his personal fortune falling $9 billion to $67.6 billion. The drop reflected a media report that India's National Share Depository froze funds that held shares in Adani companies. Reports Mr. Adani said were wrong. Locally, the minimum age for receiving the AstraZeneca jab has been lifted from 50 to 60 years, following medical advice from the Therapeutic Goods Administration. But anyone in their 50s who has had the first shot of the AstraZeneca vaccine are advised to have the second. Pfizer is now the preferred inoculation for anyone under 60, after a handful of cases of a clotting disorder was linked to the AstraZeneca jab. The new advice came as the number of community-transmitted cases of COVID-19 in New South Wales rose to 3, and possibly 4 pending confirmation of a positive test in the northwest of the city. The 3 confirmed cases are all linked and started with a driver who transported airline staff to quarantine facilities. The cases triggered a warning from Queensland Premier Anastasia Palaszczuk yesterday that anyone who had been in hotspots in Sydney would need to isolate if entering the Sunshine State. The warning came just a week ahead of the school holidays. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg said members could save more than $17 billion after the government's landmark Your Future, Your Super legislation was passed by the Senate yesterday. The legislation includes changes to annual performance test for super funds, a requirement that spending is motivated by the best financial interests of members, and a stapling mechanism which would allow employees to automatically keep their super fund when switching jobs. Coles Group will spend an extra $300 million to accelerate automation in its distribution centres and improve the supermarket's ability to compete in coming years. Chief Executive Stephen Kane said the food and liquor market was growing, but it was no longer all about who had the lowest prices. E-commerce capabilities were increasingly important in winning over customers. The group will also open smaller format Coles local stores and boost its underperforming liquor business. Coles has begun winning back share from main rival Woolworths, which did better during the pandemic. Coles share price closed down 4.5% yesterday. I reported yesterday that the Fair Work Commission had agreed to a 2.5% rise in the minimum wage, though in the case of some retailers, the increase would be delayed. Woolworths yesterday said it would pay the increase effective immediately, boosting incomes of about 155,000 workers at the group's supermarkets and Big W outlets. Good on them. And airfares are at their cheapest in a decade, according to the competition watchdog. The impact of regional express moving into routes between major cities and airlines cutting ticket prices to coax travellers back has meant super cheap prices, you've been told. That's the Fear and Greed business headlines for today. Make sure you hit follow so you get it every morning. And if you'd like more detail and more stories, search for our longer daily podcast called Fear and Greed. We also release a daily interview. Today we're looking at the rise of Amazon with tech journalist Stephen Fennick. I'll be back later with the afternoon market report. I'm Sean Aylmer. Have a great day. The partnership economy has arrived and it's powered by Impact, a proud supporter of Fear and Greed. Performance-based partnerships are relationships built on trust, peer referrals and recommendations, and they're boosting revenue growth across the world. Strategic brand partners, mobile apps, influencers, affiliates, content creators, and more can all drive sales for you. Impact's Partnership Cloud is an integrated solution to help you acquire new customers and grow revenue through the partnership channel. Find out how companies like Uber, Nike, Canva, Woolworths, and eBay use Impact to power their partnership success. Visit impact.com/growth to find out more.